53 BC. Julius Caesar was leading one of the biggest military campaigns in history, the war in Gaul. Its aim? To make Roman subjects of the tribes inhabiting the vast territory stretching from the Pyrenees to the North Sea. A campaign which led Caesar to the confluence of the rivers Seine, Marne, Oise, and Bièvre. The territory of the Parisii.
They were a tribe that valued their independence and drew their strength from their location on this part of the Seine. A great deal of merchandise from north and south came through this stretch of river between Britain and Italy.
A trade hub in the hands of a bunch of pesky Gauls intent on repelling the invader. To subjugate them, Caesar engaged one of the last great battles of the war in Gaul, the Battle of Lutetia. Facing his legions, the Parisii displayed fierce resistance. But attacked from all sides, they were finally defeated and hunted down to the last man.
The war in Gaul ended with the Battle of Lutetia. After that, Roman colonization could begin.
The Romans needed to keep a close eye on the Parisii, who'd been very hostile to the conquest. So we believe they set up a first billet to monitor river traffic on the Seine.
A military presence that would shape the fate of Paris. Because now conquered, Gaul would become part of the empire. Caesar's successor, Augustus, reorganized Gaul into 4 provinces. Under the control of the Senate, Gallia Narbonensis linking Italy to Spain. And under his own control, the 3 Gauls, Gallia Aquitania, Gallia Belgica, and Gallia Lugdunensis, into which the Parisii were integrated. Provinces on which Rome would impose its mark.
They needed to construct roads and all the buildings that would allow the ensemble to function. Urbanization meant Romanization.
And for this, the Romans didn't use force, but a much more powerful weapon: civilization.
Once they had conquered a territory by force, they soon set out to conquer the subjugated population with the Roman way of life.
To turn the Gauls into perfect citizens of the empire, Lutetia would need all the assets of a Roman city: forum, temple, theater, baths, all the buildings to make the new city a symbol of Roman power for the entire region. The 2nd century AD. Built from the ashes of a Gaul conquered by Julius Caesar, Lutetia fulfilled its role perfectly. To make the indomitable Gallic Parisii accept their servitude to the occupier. A feat made possible thanks to a social policy well proven in Rome: entertainment.
Entertainment was used by those with high social ranking to cement their authority.
The Roman Empire was a dictatorship. We'll give you bread and games and you leave us in peace. Don't worry about anything else. Leave that to us.
Shows which required the construction of new structures. In the south of the city, a stone's throw from the banks of the Seine, the theater. Long since disappeared, this edifice, inherited from ancient Greece, had a semicircular auditorium and a stage wall. In the southeast, just outside the city, the amphitheater. A purely Roman invention, this gigantic structure constructed around a stage hosted bloody and often fatal shows.
There were gladiator fights, animal hunts, fights with animals.
It was used for executions, usually in the morning. Those sentenced to death were thrown to the animals, generally after suffering a number of tortures.
It was showing to the native peoples what Rome had to offer. And it was also a political symbol of Rome, the power of Rome and the civilization of Rome.
An amphitheater among the largest to be constructed in Gaul, with seating for 17,000 spectators. Located in the heart of the 5th arrondissement of Paris, the remains, while in exceptional condition, don't give a true idea of its original size.
In the late 1st century AD, the building that stood here had a facade that reached a height of 15 meters. And the seating rose up to the height of buildings we can see today. So that gives you an idea of what's missing from the edifice.
Arenas that are among the jewels of Paris's heritage. A heritage which could have disappeared forever. Because during more than a millennium, the ancient city sank into oblivion, buried under centuries of successive periods of construction. It wasn't until the 19th century that Roman Lutetia re-emerged from the bowels of Paris. (1852). By order of the Emperor Napoleon III, Baron Haussmann embarked on the most ambitious city planning project the French capital had ever known. Massive work was undertaken to demolish entire districts and lay out new, wide boulevards and avenues across the city. But Haussmann was completely unaware that this work would uncover the remains of forgotten Lutetia. An archaeological treasure which would have been left to oblivion were it not for the obstinacy of one man, Théodore Vacher.
You have to imagine Paris as a massive construction site for 50 years. Buildings were demolished, avenues laid out, new buildings constructed, and Théodore Vacher suddenly became aware that whole sections of the city's archaeological heritage risked being buried forever.
During 5 decades, this pioneer of the archaeology of Paris closely monitored demolition after demolition. He painstakingly noted more than 400 discoveries. He left an inestimable inheritance for archaeologists who would follow in his footsteps. 10,000 documents, maps, and sketches.
He was so stubborn and relentless that he was nicknamed the Wild Boar. He saved the ancient city because he saw it was like a library going up in flames. But he didn't save paper, but stone, by throwing himself under the picks of the laborers.
An obsession which in 1869 would lead him to what we now call the Arènes de Lutèce. It was during the laying out of the Rue Monge that Vacher identified the remains of the Roman amphitheater thanks to its oval arena. But a wall with niches in it, to the east of the edifice, put him onto another lead.
Théodore Vacher's proposed reconstruction shows that he realized that this was no ordinary amphitheater, closed all the way round the arena by seating. It shows a kind of horseshoe, looking onto some kind of stage, with an extremely high wall at the back to reverberate the sound to the audience in the seating.
So the Lutetia Amphitheater may have been a prototype for a new type of edifice, half theater, half amphitheater. Constructed in the late 1st century AD, it is 130 meters across and 100 meters deep. All around it, a gallery allowed spectators to reach their seats through vomitoria. Two lateral corridors, each 39 meters long and 5.8 meters wide, led to the arena. The cavea, the 3 levels of seating, looked onto a 3-meter-high stage backed by an ornamental wall 15 meters in height.
There are few show venues of this type to compare it with. It was a bit like a multi-purpose hall today. When there were gladiator fights, people sat all around the arena, with seats on the stage. And for plays, seats could be brought into the arena itself. So it was pretty unique in the Roman world.
The stage wall is long gone, but a few remains testify to the opulence of the decoration. Like these sculpted capitals, or this stunning head of a statue, the only one ever discovered in Paris.
It could be a divinity with a laurel wreath, or a member of the imperial family. The highly decorated stage wall was there to symbolize the wealth of the empire and the authority of the emperor over the cities and their provinces.
Although the amphitheater was meant to embody the power of Rome, its designers nonetheless had to rationalize its construction. For this, they could count on a resource that was readily available in large quantities beneath the Paris subsoil: limestone.
I mean, most of the material came locally. So the only thing they really had to import was the luxury items, like the marbles, which would be coming from elsewhere in the Mediterranean, be it Italy or Greece or North Africa.
Extracted from open-air quarries, the stones were cut on site. To reduce the number of blocks needed for construction, they made an intelligent choice: to build the huge edifice backing onto a hill.
They could have built on flat land if they'd wanted, but they backed it onto the hill to save money and effort. They avoided having to build 2 levels, which would have been required on flat land.
And that is not all. Its structure, made up of radiating walls, formed deep foundations which were filled with earth and rubble. That way, the architects could avoid constructing expensive vaults to support the seating. An ingenious solution, but one which came with an inconvenience: that of enabling the lateral walls to support all the weight of the embankment.
They needed to contain the force exerted to prevent parts of the cavea from collapsing into the corridors below. To do so, they added tall, semicircular buttresses. Imagine these as niches crowned by arches, which distributed the force along the top part of the facade, ensuring the stability of the wall.
Below the cavea, a 2.5-meter-high podium wall protected the spectators from the wild animals and marked the outline of the arena. The 52 by 45-meter surface was the heart of the amphitheater. Roman arenas were originally rectangular, but this changed during the 1st century BC and they became oval. There was a good reason for this.
The rectangular arena had to go because the animals would go and hide in the corners. This was no good for the show, so they cut the corners and gradually produced the ideal oval shape.
A shape which also allowed the entire audience to see every part of the show. Especially the gladiator fights, the biggest attraction of all the circus games.
They were the superstars of the day. Everyone knew their names, their faces were on objects, mosaics, and so on. They were very famous, and their fame spread far and wide.
Superstars who were very rarely put to death. Because these athletes were a big source of revenue for the organizers of the games. So to help them avoid any nasty injuries, a temple was made available to them close to the arena.
This was a closed, covered room, just off one of the corridors that served the lower part of the seating area. It would have been quite dark, and the public weren't allowed in there.
At the back of the room, there is still a pedestal in a niche which probably supported the statue of a divinity who brought the gladiators good luck.
There was Nemesis, for example, the goddess of vengeance, or Diana, the goddess of hunting. Divinities who were partly linked to the world of combat and hunting in the arena.
In 1883, Theodore Vacher identified 5 caceres around the arena. Stalls closed by an iron gate in which the animals were caged before being released into the arena. These were originally invisible from the seating.
You have to imagine not being able to see this wall because there was another wall just in front of it, forming a service corridor. What probably happened was one of the stalls was opened, releasing the animal into the corridor, and it would gradually find its way into the arena. This corridor was also used by the gladiators so that they could take their opponent by surprise. All this added to the impact of the show in the arena.
In Lutetia, as everywhere in the Roman world, the show extended to the seating as well. Because every rung of the social ladder was gathered in a single place for the games. So the amphitheater was a strong social marker where the elite, having reserved the best seats, imposed its authority.
The seating was differentiated, and this was part of the unequal society that was wanted by Imperial Rome. Augustus insisted on this. He was totally against any idea of equality.
The space was very divided, with the wealthy in the lower part of the seating, generally in the most prestigious places, in the center of this lower section. And the further up the cavea you went, the poorer the people, with, right at the top, women and slaves.
In Lutetia, as elsewhere in the ancient world, the shows took place during the day, exposing the spectators to the scorching sun. To solve this problem, the Romans invented an ingenious system, the last remaining trace of which is this stone, pierced with a hole of 20 centimeters in diameter, discovered during the excavations in 1883. A tall mast was inserted into this hole, and from it extended a web of ropes supporting huge canvas sheets, the vellum.
This was a very important discovery because amphitheatres equipped with a vellum were few and far between. It was a very expensive system. They needed wood for the masts, ropes, and constant maintenance of the canvas sheeting.
These would then be manoeuvred, usually by people with a sailing background, even from the Roman Navy, because they were used to doing it on ships.
A complex system, the last secrets of which are yet to be understood.
The last thing to reconstruct, and this was what flummoxes archaeologists and architects, is the machinery needed to operate the sheeting. How was it unfurled and retracted? You can come up with suggestions, but there are no actual traces left anywhere.
With its amphitheater, Lutetia became one of the Roman cities of Gaul with the most important monuments. It drew people from surrounding areas and reached a population of almost 15,000 inhabitants. How did the Romans achieve such a feat? How did the city rise in status in Gaul in just a few decades? To find the answers, we must go back to its origins,